John 19, verses 26 and 27 from the New Living Translation. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple that he loved, he said to her, "Dear woman, here is your son." And he said to this disciple, "Here is your mother." And from then on, this disciple took her into his home. This is the word of the Lord.
Families often begin in the strangest of places. One of my favorite things to do is to ask older couples how they met, where they met. You get some of the best stories. He was a high school football player and she was a cheerleader on the other team. And after the game was completed, during the obligatory handshakes, they shook each other's hands. She said, "Good game." He said, "You too." And Cupid shot his arrow, and they began dating. They've been married for 68 years and have 14 grandkids. And the whole thing started in the handshake line after a high school football game. He was a patient in a hospital and she was a nurse. When she came in to check his vitals or work on the IV, he often had some corny joke to tell or some sad pickup line. When the time came for him to get up for surgery, he accused her of looking through the crack in the back of his hospital gown, and when he accused her of that, she blushed. They've been married for 41 years, and it all started in a hospital room. One couple was hesitant to tell me where they met. I had to pull it out of them. They said, "We met in a bar. We were the best dancers there. We've been married ever since." Their family was born in a bar. And I've heard of families being born on mission trips to other countries, South Africa even. Two people meet on a different continent and a family's born. Families often begin in the strangest of places. Jesus was on the cross and the sun refused to shine. He looked down where he noticed his mother standing there. The mother of Jesus only shows up twice in the Gospel of John. The first time she shows up is a very memorable occasion. It was a wedding in Cana, a grand, festive, celebratory occasion. But at the wedding, they ran out of wine. In those days, wine was a sign of God's blessing and God's favor, brought out only on special occasions by those who could afford it. One rabbi, roughly during the time of Jesus, one rabbi wrote, when the Messiah comes, every vine will produce 1,000 branches, and every branch will produce 1,000 grapes. And every grape will produce 1,000 gallons of wine when the Messiah comes. But at this wedding, they had run out of wine. In those days of hospitality, this was taboo. It was a shameful thing to run out of wine. The mother of Jesus slides over next to him and says, Hey, they've run out of wine in the back. And Jesus says to her, "Woman, what is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." Woman? It's a strange thing to call your mother. I don't recommend it. It was not a derogatory term in those days. In fact, there was some endearment in the term. Jesus calls several women woman in the Gospel of John. The woman caught in adultery. Woman, where are your accusers? It's not a derogatory term. What makes it strange is that Jesus calls His own mother this, woman. It's almost as if Jesus was distancing Himself from His mother. She would not drive His work. He would not operate out of His own family interest. His agenda was focused on more than His mother's to-do list. Woman, what is that to you and to me? I find it funny that even with all that said, Jesus' mother turns to the servants and says, do whatever He tells you. When all was said and done, depending on how you do the math, it's hard to do this, Jesus turned water of purification, into somewhere between 120 and 180 gallons of wine when the Messiah comes. This was Jesus' first public action in John, the first thing He did in public. John calls it His first sign. And he said He did this to reveal His glory and so that His disciples would believe in Him. And they did. This was the first sign in the Gospel of John. They all saw the sign and it opened up their eyes. After that, Mary drops out of the Gospel altogether. We do not hear from her again. No mention of Mary throughout the rest of the Gospel of John. You don't hear from Jesus' dad at all in the Gospel of John. He's not mentioned once. If John was the only Gospel we had, we would know nothing of Joseph. His brothers barely make the story. In chapter 7, Jesus' brothers are trying to talk some sense into Him. Really, they were trying to shut Jesus up. And verse 5 of chapter 7 says, "For His own brothers did not believe in Him." His own brothers did not believe in Him. If the Gospel of John is any indication, Jesus did not have the best relationship with His family. And yet here, Jesus looks down from the cross and sees His mama standing there. Hardly a festive occasion here. We're a far cry from a wedding, huh? This is the last thing Jesus ever did publicly. The last sign. His hour had finally come. The wine had given way to blood, and all the celebration had become mourning. And Jesus looked at her and the disciple whom He loved, and He said, "Woman, behold your son." And to the disciple, "Behold your mother." Sort of a strange thing to say in that moment, isn't it? John's the only one that tells us this. The other Gospels don't tell us this. Here we stand at the crucible of history. Angels leaning over the heavenly banquet table to see what might happen. All the sin, all the pain, all the brokenness of all creation caught up in that one moment. We have reached the pinnacle of human history. And Jesus looks out to be sure that His mother is cared for. Surprising. Maybe it shouldn't surprise us. There is no one so important that they don't have to do the hard work of taking care of their family. A few years ago, after worship in my former church in Oklahoma City, my wife and I and the boys were walking out after church. We had been there forever. You know, some people like to stay and talk after worship. I saw angst and exasperation on Rebecca's face. "What's wrong?" She said, "You know, we have 2 little kids. They're up here all the time. They think they own the place, running up and down the pews, jumping over pews. It'd be nice if you helped a little bit when the kids were at church. It'd just be nice." And I said, "You know, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm the pastor of this church. And that time after worship is very important. I don't want to rob people of the opportunity to tell me how wonderful the sermon was on that Sunday. If I don't give people the chance to tell me how great the sermon is, it will well up within them, and it's just not healthy for that to well up. Incarceration rates will skyrocket. It will not be good if I don't hang around to talk to the people." I said, "Didn't you think the sermon was great?" I don't ask that question anymore. I thought that's the best thing anybody's heard since John the Baptist was dipping in the Jordan. "Didn't you think it was great?" And she said, "I think you should have helped me with the kids." Brothers and sisters, there's no one so important that they don't have to care for their family. No matter how essential your job or inflated your ego, there is no one that does not have to change their baby's diaper or make breakfast for their sick spouse or take care of their ailing father. Even when you're saving creation, you have to be sure your mom's cared for. Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. If we are called, as one of the great commandments tells us, to honor our father and mother, then surely Jesus, even from the cross here, is a shining example. But I think there's more going on here than meets the eye. That's always the case in the Gospel of John. There's something more powerful at work. The last thing Jesus did on this earth was create a community. The last thing Jesus did was to bring people together. Hey, you, take care of her. Hey, you, take care of him. Take care of each other. It's the last thing He did. It's interesting how some people work towards their legacy, think towards their legacy as the end of life nears. Some people set out to write their own biography. They want the world to know their story, and they leave the world a book. Some people become fascinated by family trees, their own family history, and their place in that family's history. Some people gather a family around and begin telling stories, kind of an oral book that they leave to the world. Some people write letters to everyone they love. And the last thing Jesus did as His life was ending was to form a community. And not just a community, but a family. Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. It's a family. At the cross, Jesus created a family. Have you noticed the pervasiveness of family talk in the world today? Have you noticed how many people use family language to sell what they're selling? Coaches and athletes say, this team is a family. These are my brothers, these are my sisters. Corporations say, come and join the so-and-so family. And then you go to church where there's constant chatter of brothers and sisters. Family. When someone joins our church, we make a covenant with them. Welcome to the 2BC family. Family language surrounds us. I don't know why. Maybe it has something to do with the fracturing of so many nuclear families in our day. People want family, and families in short supply. Maybe it has to do with the privatization and the individualization of our culture. Maybe it's our technology. We say our technology helps connect us, and in some ways it certainly does. But there are times I wonder if our sitting behind computers and our texting on our iPhones is an effort at communication or is an effort to avoid communication. People are separated from each other in our society. Intimate relationships are hard to come by. And yet we still have that fundamental longing for something more. Deeper relationships than status updates on Facebook. Casual how are yous, to which we don't even hang around to hear the answer. People are looking for family, connections that matter. Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. In the first sign in John, Jesus seems to distance Himself from His mother and His family. Woman, what is that to me and to you? As if to say, my life will not find its meaning from our family interests. But in the last sign at the cross, Jesus creates a fictive family where there was none. He creates a family where there was nothing before. He made a family that was more family than family, where everything was shared, from the joy and the exuberance of a wedding to the agony and the pain of a crucifixion. Is it too much of a stretch to say that at the cross, where Jesus' life ended, is precisely where the church's life begins? A few years ago, when I was in school working on my doctorate, one of the other students in my cohort was a man named Isaac Wooney. Isaac was and is a pastor in Ghana, West African nation. He's also a seminary president there. Very bright, Oxford educated, impressive. Several times in our discussions and our seminars, he would laugh at how comical we American pastors were. I remember one man in my cohort turned 30 while we were at a seminar, and he had a bucket list. One of the items on his bucket list was jumping out of an airplane, so he skydove out of the airplane. The next Monday, he's telling us about his adventure, and I turned to Isaac and I said, "Isaac, what would happen in Ghana if someone jumped out of an airplane?" And he paused for a moment and he said, "They would make him king." One time we were complaining about how hard it was to raise children. We asked Isaac about his children. He said, "I have 26 children. 24 are adopted. But I do not know the difference." He said, "We are blood kin." The rest of us stopped complaining. One of our gatherings, we all asked Isaac what God was doing in Ghana. And he said the week before he came to the U.S., there was a woman who had a profound conversion experience, a vision, she said, of Jesus. Joined their congregation. This woman was very, very poor, and she fed her family largely off of a small garden behind her very modest home. The week before Isaac came, another family in their church, the husband, the dad, lost his job. And this family was very despondent, wondering how they were going to eat. Isaac was over at their house praying for this family when there was a knock at the door, and in walked this rather poor woman with basketfuls of vegetables and fruit. Isaac pulled her off to the side and he said, "How will you feed your family?" She said, "I am." He said, "No, your blood family. How will you feed your blood family?" And she said, "The blood of Jesus makes us family. We are blood kin." Friends, there is no way to measure everything that flows from the cross. I don't know much of what I speak about the cross. There's enough forgiveness to cover every sin, enough love to bridge every chasm, enough healing to mend every wound. But forgiveness and healing and love can never occur in the abstract. Love and forgiveness and healing aren't just floating around in the air outside. They only happen in the concrete with very real people. It takes a community. Can I ask you, what is more powerful? To hear someone speak of love? To hear 1,000 preachers preach on love? Or to see one person practice it? What is more meaningful? To hear someone talk of forgiveness and all the positive repercussions of forgiveness? Or to behold a community that actually practices it? The last thing Jesus did, His magnum opus, was to create a community. It's what He left the world. You take care of him, you take care of her. And it was through that community that His teachings were embodied and that His life was lived. The community, like the wine at the first sign, was evidence enough that Jesus was the Messiah, that Jesus is powerful, that Jesus can make something out of nothing. This community is a sign of God's blessing and God's favor in the world. And not just a community, a family. A family that transcends all the boundaries that divide us. Brothers and sisters, there are days where the evidence seems sparse for me. I confess. There are days I wonder if God really cares for us, if God really loves us, if God is still running the show. There are days when I wonder if the way of Jesus is the way, or if it's sheer madness and folly. There are days for me, and I bet for you, when the wine runs out and the sky turns black. Days when we wonder how in the world we can make sense out of what we see. There are days when I just want a tinge of evidence. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I have nothing to lose. On those days when I want a shred of evidence, where I most often look is to you. On days when I don't have the strength to sing, your voices carry the song. On days when I don't know what to pray, your prayers carry me and each other. On the days when I doubt, I look around this room and I see a family that has been brought together, a family beyond our ingenuity and our greatest creative potential. You are evidence that Jesus is the Messiah. Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. We are blood kin. Families begin in the strangest of places. High school football games, hospital rooms, bars. I know a family that was born at the foot of the cross when Jesus looked at two people and said, take care of each other. Be family for one another. One of the two was his mother. The other one is called the disciple whom he loved. We don't know who this is. The gospel never tells us. Traditionally, it's been John. Most people think it's John. The text doesn't tell us. Some scholars think it's Lazarus, raised from the dead, but we don't know. We can play all sorts of games. The disciple whom he loved. I think there's a good chance that the person standing next to Mary that day at the foot of the cross was you and me. I don't know. But just to be on the safe side, brothers and sisters, let us grant Jesus His dying wish, and let's take care of each other. Would you look around this room for a moment? Seriously, look around this room. I know it's strange and odd. Brothers and sisters, behold your brothers and sisters. Take care of each other. Amen.